The gunshot echoed through the valley like thunder, sending birds scattering into the clear blue Montana sky as Zara Daniels crouched behind a boulder, clutching her father's pocket watch and trying to steady her breathing. This wasn't how she'd planned to spend her 22nd birthday, but then again, nothing in the last 3 months had gone according to plan. The year was 1878, and Silver Creek was supposed to be her fresh start after her father's passing left her with nothing but debts and painful memories back in Boston. The teaching position at the town's newly established schoolhouse had seemed like providence until the stagecoach robbery that had left her stranded, 2 miles from town with nothing but the clothes on her back and her father's watch hidden in her bodice. "I know you're there, miss," a gravelly voice called out. "Hand over whatever valuables you've got, and maybe I'll let you walk away." Zara pressed her back harder against the boulder, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd heard the stories of highway robbers in the West, but experiencing it firsthand was entirely different. Her throat felt dry as desert sand as she frantically searched for an escape route. The sound of approaching hoofbeats cut through the tension, fast and purposeful. The robber cursed, and Zara risked a peek around the edge of her shelter. A lone rider was galloping toward them, silhouetted against the setting sun, riding as though the devil himself were in pursuit. "Hey," the newcomer shouted, his voice deep and commanding. "Step away from the lady." The robber fired a wild shot in the rider's direction before scrambling for his horse. The newcomer drew his own weapon with lightning speed, firing a warning shot into the air. That was all it took for the would-be thief to abandon his plans, spurring his horse into a gallop and disappearing over the ridge. Zara remained frozen, unsure if she'd just exchanged one danger for another. The stranger dismounted with fluid grace, his spurs jingling softly as his boots hit the ground. He approached slowly, holstering his weapon, hands raised to show he meant no harm. "You all right, madam?" he asked, and when she finally looked up, Zara found herself staring into the most startlingly blue eyes she'd ever seen. Yes, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." He tipped his hat, revealing dark hair with streaks of sun-bleached gold. "Jackson Reid, madam." "Friends call me Jack." He offered his hand to help her up. "Seems like you've had quite the welcome to Silver Creek." "How did you know I'm heading to Silver Creek?" Zara asked, accepting his hand but keeping a cautious distance once on her feet. A smile touched his weather-worn face, softening the hard angles. "Stagecoach driver in town was worried when you didn't arrive. Said a lady schoolteacher was expected today. Figured I'd ride out and see what the delay was." He glanced at the horizon. "Lucky I did." Zara smoothed down her dusty traveling dress, trying to regain some semblance of dignity. "Zara Daniels. I was to be met by someone from the school board. That'd be Mr. Holloway. He waited as long as he could, but his wife's expecting their 5th child any day now." Jack gestured to his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion. "If you don't mind riding double, I can get you to town before nightfall." Zara hesitated, weighing her limited options. Stay alone as night fell, or trust this stranger who had just saved her from robbery or worse. "I don't suppose I have much choice," she said finally. Jack's smile widened, revealing a dimple in his left cheek. "Don't worry, Miss Daniels. In Silver Creek, you're about to find more choices than you might know what to do with." He couldn't have known how prophetic those words would prove to be. Riding behind Jackson Reid into Silver Creek, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Zara was keenly aware of the man whose waist she reluctantly clung to. He smelled of leather, horses, and something uniquely masculine that she tried her best to ignore. Silver Creek emerged from the landscape like a mirage, a collection of wooden buildings lining a wide main street, with mountains rising majestically in the background. Despite the late hour, the town hummed with activity. Miners, cowboys, and townsfolk moved about their business, and more than a few paused to stare as Jack guided his horse down the center of the street. "Word travels fast here," he explained, sensing her discomfort at the attention. New schoolteachers been the talk of the town for weeks. They stopped in front of a white 2-story building with a neatly painted sign declaring it Mrs. Abernathy's boarding house. Before Jack could dismount, the door flew open and a plump woman in her 50s rushed out, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. "Land sakes, Jackson Reid, is this our teacher? We were worried sick." The woman's sharp eyes took in Zara's disheveled appearance. "My goodness, child, you look like you've been through the ringer. Come in, come in." Jack helped Zara down, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "Found her about 2 miles out, Mrs. Abernathy. Stagecoach was robbed. She's lucky she wasn't on it when it happened. Mrs. Abernathy clicked her tongue sympathetically. "Those Jenkins boys again, I'd wager. Sheriff Tate needs to do something about them once and for all." She ushered Zara toward the door. "Come along, dear. Hot bath and supper waiting for you." Zara turned back to Jack, suddenly aware she hadn't properly thanked him. "Mr. Reid, I don't know how to." "Jack," he corrected gently, "and no thanks necessary, just doing what any decent man would do." He tipped his hat again. "I'm sure we'll be seeing each other around, Miss Daniels." Silver Creek isn't big enough to avoid anyone for long. There was something in his tone that made Zara wonder if he was looking forward to their next meeting as much as she suddenly was. Mrs. Abernathy's boarding house proved to be immaculately kept, with polished wooden floors and cheerful curtains at every window. The older woman clucked over Zara like a mother hen, expressing outrage at the robbery and relief at her safety in the same breath, as she led her to a small but comfortable room on the second floor. Bathrooms down the hall. "I'll have hot water brought up directly," Mrs. Abernathy said. "Supper's at 7, but I can bring you a tray if you're too tired for company tonight." "That's very kind, but I think I'd prefer to meet everyone," Zara replied, surprising herself with her own answer. After the day she'd had, solitude should have been appealing, but something about this town made her want to dive in head first. An hour later, freshly bathed and dressed in one of the few garments she'd been carrying in her handbag rather than her stolen trunk, Zara made her way downstairs. The dining room held a long oak table where 6 people were already seated. Conversation halted as she entered, and all eyes turned to her. "Here she is," Mrs. Abernathy announced proudly. "Everyone, this is Miss Zara Daniels, our new school teacher. Miss Daniels, meet your fellow boarders." Introductions followed. Dr. William Peterson and his wife Martha, Miss Judith Barnes, the milliner, Mr. Frederick Thompson, who ran the telegraph office, and the widow Wilson, who owned the town's only bookshop. The 7th chair, Zara noticed, remained empty. "Is someone missing?" she asked as she took her seat. Mrs. Abernathy placed a bowl of stew in front of her. "That'd be Jack's chair. He takes most of his meals here when he's in town, though heaven knows his ranch is big enough to warrant a cook of his own." "Ranch?" Zara asked before she could stop herself, her curiosity piqued. Dr. Peterson chuckled. "The Reid family owns the biggest cattle spread in the county. Triple R Ranch has been in their family since before Montana was even a territory. Jack runs it now," Martha Peterson added, "since his father passed 3 years back. His brother James helps some, but Jack's the one with the head for business." Zara processed this information, reconciling the image of the rough and ready man who'd rescued her with that of a wealthy rancher. Before she could ask more, the front door opened, and the man himself stepped into the foyer, removing his hat and hanging it on a hook. "Speak of the devil," Mrs. Abernathy said with obvious affection. "We were just telling Miss Daniels about you, Jack." Jack entered the dining room, his presence somehow making the spacious room feel smaller. He'd cleaned up since their encounter, his dark hair still damp from washing, wearing a fresh shirt that strained slightly across broad shoulders. His gaze immediately found Zara, and the smile that followed created a peculiar fluttering sensation in her stomach. "All good things, I hope," he said, taking the empty seat across from her. "We were just getting to the part about how you're the most eligible bachelor in 3 counties, Widow Wilson teased, causing Jack to groan good-naturedly. "Now you've gone and scared our new teacher," he protested. "Pay them no mind, Miss Daniels. They've been trying to marry me off since I turned 21. 8 years ago," Mrs. Abernathy added helpfully, placing a bowl in front of Jack, "and getting more stubborn with each passing year." The conversation flowed easily after that, with questions about Boston, Zara's teaching experience, and gentle warnings about certain troublesome students she'd meet on Monday. Throughout the meal, she found her gaze repeatedly drawn to Jack, who listened more than he spoke, those blue eyes missing nothing. After dinner, when the others had retired to the parlor for coffee, Zara stepped onto the front porch, needing a moment of fresh air after the overwhelming day. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. "It's something, isn't it?" Jack's voice came from the shadows, and Zara turned to find him leaning against a porch column, rolling a cigarette with practiced ease. "The sky out here. Never quite got used to how big it is. It's beautiful," she agreed. "Though I admit, everything feels overwhelming at the moment." He lit his cigarette, the brief flare of the match illuminating the angles of his face. "You're thinking you've made a mistake coming here." It wasn't a question, and the accuracy of his observation startled her. "How did you know?" Jack exhaled a stream of smoke that disappeared into the night air. "Seen it before. City folk come out here thinking it'll be an adventure, then reality sets in how hard life can be, how isolated." His eyes found hers in the darkness. "But there's something about this place, Miss Daniels, gets in your blood." "Please call me Zara," she said impulsively. "After today, formality seems unnecessary." His smile was slow, thoughtful. "Zara, then." The way he said her name, like he was testing the feel of it on his tongue, sent an unexpected shiver through her. "Cold?" he asked immediately, misinterpreting her reaction. "No, I'm fine, just—" She searched for the right words. "Processing everything, I suppose." Jack nodded, taking another drag from his cigarette. "Silver Creek needs a teacher like you, someone with spirit. Those kids deserve the best. You seem very invested in the education of the town's children," Zara observed. "I am." His expression grew more serious. "My mother was a teacher before she married my father. Believed education was the path to a better future, even out here, maybe especially out here." She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. The simple past tense and the shadow that crossed his face told Zara all she needed to know. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant piano music drifting from the saloon down the street and the occasional whinny of horses from the livery stable. "I should let you rest," Jack said finally, straightening up. "You've had quite a day, and tomorrow the whole town will be wanting to meet you. Will you be among them?" The question slipped out before Zara could consider its implications. In the dim light from the windows, she saw his smile return. "Count on it. Someone needs to warn you which students are going to give you the most trouble." He tipped an imaginary hat to her. "Good night, Zara Daniels. Good night, Jack Reid." As she watched him walk down the street, his tall figure eventually swallowed by darkness, Zara knew with sudden clarity that Silver Creek and its most eligible bachelor might prove far more dangerous to her carefully constructed independence than any highway robber could ever be. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear, and Zara found herself being ushered to church by Mrs. Abernathy with the same efficient kindness the woman applied to everything. The white clapboard building at the end of the main street seemed to be the gathering place for the entire community, with wagons and horses tethered outside and families in their Sunday best filing through the doors. "Everyone's eager to meet you," Mrs. Abernathy explained as they approached. "Nothing brings out the curious like a new face, especially one as pretty as yours." Zara smoothed the skirt of her blue dress, one of the few presentable garments she had, until her trunk could be replaced, and fought the urge to fidget with her carefully pinned hair. "I hope I don't disappoint them." "Nonsense, you'll do just fine." Mrs. Abernathy patted her arm. "And don't worry about tomorrow, the school board will have everything ready for you." Inside the church, Zara was introduced to so many people that names and faces began to blur together. Parents eager to discuss their children's education, members of the school board outlining their expectations, young unmarried men suddenly developing an intense interest in literature. Through it all, she searched the crowd for a particular pair of blue eyes, but Jack Reid was conspicuously absent. "Looking for someone." A female voice interrupted her thoughts, and Zara turned to find herself face to face with a striking woman about her own age, dressed in a fashionable green dress that complemented her auburn hair. "I'm simply trying to remember everyone's names," Zara replied diplomatically. The woman's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Jessica Harrington, My father owns the bank. She extended a gloved hand. I understand you've already met Jack Reid. He mentioned rescuing you yesterday. Something in Jessica's tone made Zara instantly wary. Yes, Mr. Reid was kind enough to assist me after the stagecoach robbery. Jack's always been the gallant type. Jessica's gaze was assessing. We've known each other since childhood. Our families have always been close. The implication was clear, and Zara found herself both amused and irritated by the territorial display. How fortunate for you both to have such a long-standing friendship. Before Jessica could respond, Reverend Clark called the congregation to take their seats. As the service began, Zara found herself distracted, her mind drifting to Jack's absence and the unexpected pang of disappointment it caused. She'd known the man for barely a day. What was it about him that had left such an impression? After the service, as people lingered to socialize, Zara was approached by an older gentleman with kind eyes and a neatly trimmed white beard. Miss Daniels, I'm Edward Holloway, head of the school board. I must apologize for not meeting you yesterday as planned. No apology necessary, Mr. Holloway, I understand your wife is expecting. He beamed. Any day now, but I wanted to personally welcome you and invite you to tour the schoolhouse this afternoon if you're feeling up to it after your ordeal. I'd like that very much, Zara replied, genuinely eager to see her new workplace. Excellent. Shall we say 2 o'clock? I'll have the keys and can show you everything you need to know. The schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a sturdy one-room building with large windows to let in natural light. Inside, rows of desks faced a teacher's desk on a raised platform, a large slate board mounted on the wall behind it. Bookshelves lined one wall, though they were only half filled. We've been collecting donations for a proper library, Mr. Holloway explained as Zara ran her fingers along the spines of the existing volumes. Education has become a priority as more families settle here. How many students will I be teaching? Zara asked, already mentally organizing lessons. 27 at present, ranging from 6 to 16 years old. He handed her a ledger. Their names and ages are recorded here. The older ones only attend when farm work allows, especially during planting and harvest. Zara nodded, familiar with the practical realities of rural education. And supplies. Mr. Holloway showed her the cabinet where paper, chalk, and other necessities were stored. We order from Denver twice a year. If you need anything specific, just let me know. As they were finishing the tour, the schoolhouse door opened and Jack Reid stepped inside, carrying a large wooden crate. The sight of him sent Zara's heart into an unexpected gallop. Afternoon, Ed, Miss Daniels. Jack set the crate on the teacher's desk. Thought these might be useful. He removed the lid, revealing dozens of books. From my mother's collection. Figured they'd do more good here than gathering dust at the ranch. Mr. Holloway whistled appreciatively as he examined the titles. This is mighty generous, Jack. Some of these would be hard to come by even in Denver. Zara picked up a well-worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, running her fingers over the embossed leather cover. These are beautiful. Mother would have wanted them to be used, Jack said simply, his eyes on Zara. She believed in the power of stories to open minds. A woman after my own heart, Zara replied, looking up to find his gaze still fixed on her, something warm and interested in his expression that made her cheeks heat. Mr. Holloway cleared his throat. Well, I should be getting back to Martha. Miss Daniels, feel free to stay as long as you like to get acquainted with your classroom. Jack, would you mind seeing her safely back to town when she's finished? Be my pleasure, Jack answered, never taking his eyes off Zara. When they were alone, a charged silence filled the room. Zara busied herself arranging the books on the shelves, acutely aware of Jack's presence as he leaned against her desk, watching her work. I missed you at church this morning, she said finally, immediately regretting the admission. His smile was slow and pleased. Had to ride out to check on a sick calf, sorry to disappoint. I wasn't disappointed, she lied, focusing intently on alphabetizing the novels, merely making an observation, of course. His tone made it clear he didn't believe her for a second. I hear Jessica Harrington introduced herself. Zara paused, glancing over her shoulder at him. She did. She made quite sure I understood your families are close. Jack ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Zara was beginning to recognize as a sign of frustration. Jessica and I grew up together. Our fathers always hoped we'd marry someday, combine the Harrington and Reid fortunes. And is that what you hope as well? Zara asked, surprising herself with her boldness. No, the word was emphatic, brooking no argument. Jessica's a fine woman, but he trailed off, then changed direction. Let's just say I've never been one to follow the path laid out for me by others. Zara turned to face him fully. What path do you follow then? His eyes held hers, and for a moment she thought he might close the distance between them. Instead, he straightened up and moved toward the bookshelf, standing close enough that she could smell the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him. I believe in making my own choices, he said quietly, in following my instincts. His gaze dropped briefly to her lips before returning to her eyes. And right now, my instincts are telling me that Silver Creek just got a whole lot more interesting with your arrival, Zara Daniels. Her breath caught at the frank admission. Mr. Reid, Jack, he corrected, his voice low. Jack, she amended. I came here to teach, not to. She gestured vaguely between them, unable to articulate the crackling tension she felt. To cause a respectable rancher to have thoroughly disreputable thoughts, he suggested, his mouth quirking into a half-smile that made her stomach flip. That's not I didn't mean, Zara stammered, flustered by his directness. Jack laughed softly. I'm teasing you, Zara, mostly. He stepped back, giving her space. I respect why you're here. Teaching these kids is important work, but I'm not going to pretend I'm not interested in knowing you better. His expression grew more serious. If that makes you uncomfortable, just say the word and I'll keep my distance. Zara considered his offer. The sensible response would be to accept it. She'd come to Silver Creek for a fresh start, to establish herself professionally, not to be distracted by a handsome rancher with magnetic blue eyes and a smile that made her forget her carefully constructed plans. I don't want you to keep your distance, she heard herself say instead. But I need to focus on establishing myself here. These children deserve my full attention. Jack's expression softened. Fair enough. How about we start with friendship then? Every newcomer to Silver Creek could use a friend. Friendship, Zara agreed, extending her hand as if to seal the deal. When Jack took it, his calloused palm warm against hers, she knew friendship with this man would be both the easiest and most difficult thing she'd ever attempted. Monday morning arrived with a mixture of excitement and trepidation for Zara. Standing at the front of the classroom as children of various ages filed in, some openly curious, others shy or sullen, she felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. These young minds were now partly in her care, their futures potentially shaped by what she could teach them. The morning passed in a blur of introductions, assessments, and establishing rules. By noon, Zara had a better understanding of what she was facing. A diverse group ranging from eager learners to reluctant attendees with widely varying levels of previous education. During the lunch break, as the children scattered to eat their packed meals in the schoolyard, Zara remained at her desk, making notes about each student. A knock at the open door interrupted her work, and she looked up to find Jack leaning against the doorframe, hat in hand. Thought you might be hungry, he said, holding up a basket. Mrs. Abernathy sent this over. Zara's stomach growled in response, reminding her she'd been too nervous to eat much breakfast. That was thoughtful of her. How's the first day going? Jack asked, setting the basket on her desk and pulling up a chair. Challenging, Zara admitted. The older boys, the Prescott brothers and Thomas Miller in particular, seemed determined to test my authority. Jack nodded, unsurprised. James Prescott worked for me last summer. Good with horses, but has a chip on his shoulder the size of Wyoming. He unpacked the basket, revealing sandwiches, apple slices, and 2 jars of lemonade. Their father drinks and their mother ran off 2 years ago. They're raising themselves, more or less. Zara's heart softened at this information. That explains some things. And Thomas. His father died in a mining accident last year. He's the man of the house now, helping his mother with 3 younger siblings. Jack handed her a sandwich. Most of these kids have hard lives, Zara. School might be the only place they get to just be children. She took a bite, considering his words. You know a lot about them, Jack shrugged. Small town, and I make it my business to know who's struggling. Can't help everyone, but I try where I can. This glimpse of his character, the quiet generosity, the genuine concern for others, added another layer to Zara's growing fascination with Jackson Reid. He wasn't just the handsome, eligible rancher everyone described. There was depth to him that few seemed to acknowledge. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Jack asked, his expression curious. Zara shook her head. "Just realizing there's more to you than meets the eye." A slow smile spread across his face. "I could say the same about you, schoolteacher. I've seen how those kids already look at you, even the troublemakers. You've got something special." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. Before she could respond, the school bell rang, signaling the end of lunch break. Jack stood, gathering the remains of their meal. "I should let you get back to it," he said. "If those Prescott boys give you any more trouble, just mention you're friends with me. Might help." "Thank you for lunch," Zara said. "And the advice." He tipped his hat with a smile. "Anytime." As the afternoon session began and students filtered back into the classroom, Zara noticed several curious glances and whispered conversations. Clearly, Jack Reid's visit had been noted, and in a town like Silver Creek, that would mean gossip. She straightened her shoulders and called the class to order, determined not to let speculation about her personal life distract from her purpose here. Yet as the days passed and settled into a routine, Jack became a regular fixture in Zara's new life. Sometimes he'd appear at the schoolhouse with a book he thought she might enjoy, or to fix a loose floorboard no one else had noticed. Other times, they'd simply cross paths in town, exchanging pleasantries that somehow always left Zara smiling for hours afterward. Their friendship was the subject of town speculation, of course. Jessica Harrington made her disapproval known through pointed remarks whenever they encountered each other, while Mrs. Abernathy seemed delighted by the development, often finding excuses to seat them together at dinner. By the third week of October, as golden aspens shimmered against the evergreens on the mountainsides, Zara had settled comfortably into her role. The children were responding well to her teaching methods, even the initial troublemakers showing improvement. She'd earned the respect of the school board and most parents, and found genuine friendship with several of the town's women, particularly Martha Peterson and Widow Wilson. But it was her relationship with Jack that occupied her thoughts during quiet moments. They'd maintained the boundaries of friendship, yet there was an undeniable current between them that seemed to strengthen with each encounter. Zara found herself looking forward to his visits, cataloging the sound of his laugh, the way sunlight caught in his hair, the thoughtful expression he wore when listening to her ideas about education. "You're in danger of falling in love with that man," Widow Wilson observed one Saturday afternoon as they browsed her bookshop together. Zara nearly dropped the volume she was examining. "I beg your pardon," the older woman's eyes twinkled knowingly. "I've been watching you, my dear. The way you light up when Jack Reid enters a room, the way you lean toward him when he speaks as if drawn by an invisible thread." "That's ridiculous," Zara protested weakly. "We're friends, MMM." Widow Wilson sorted through a stack of new arrivals. "I was friends with my Harold for 6 months before we admitted we were in love. Best friends make the best lovers, in my experience." "Mrs. Wilson," Zara exclaimed, scandalized and amused. The widow laughed. "I'm 72 years old, dear. I've earned the right to speak plainly." Her expression softened. "Life out here isn't easy, especially for women. Finding someone who truly sees you is rare. Don't let pride or fear stand in your way if that's what you've found." Before Zara could formulate a response, the shop door opened, bringing in a gust of crisp autumn air and the very subject of their conversation. Jack entered, removing his hat as he crossed the threshold, his eyes immediately finding Zara among the bookshelves. "Ladies," he greeted them with a smile. "Hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Widow Wilson said, giving Zara a meaningful look before moving toward the counter. "I was just telling Miss Daniels about our town's harvest festival next weekend." "Ah, yes," Jack's expression brightened. "It's quite the event. Dancing, food, games for the children. The whole county turns out for it." "It sounds lovely," Zara said, trying to ignore the knowing glances Widow Wilson was sending her way. "Actually," Jack began, uncharacteristically hesitant. "I was wondering if you might consider attending with me." When Zara didn't immediately respond, he hurried on. "As friends, of course, but it would be my honor to escort you." Widow Wilson busied herself with papers behind the counter, pretending not to listen while clearly hanging on every word. Zara knew accepting his invitation would only fuel the town's speculation about their relationship. Yet the thought of spending an evening in Jack's company, away from the constraints of their usual encounters, was too tempting to resist. "I'd like that," she said finally, rewarded by the way his entire face lit up at her acceptance. "Wonderful. I'll call for you at the boarding house around 4 o'clock. At her nod, he replaced his hat. "Ladies, enjoy your afternoon. I've got to see a man about a horse, literally, in this case." As the door closed behind him, Widow Wilson abandoned all pretense of disinterest. "Well now, that's a development." "It's just a festival," Zara protested weakly. "My dear girl," the older woman said with a laugh, "in Silver Creek, nothing is ever just anything. By this time next week, half the town will be predicting your wedding date." As Zara would soon discover, Widow Wilson wasn't exaggerating. The week leading up to the Harvest Festival passed in a flurry of excitement. The schoolchildren could talk of little else, and Zara cleverly incorporated the festival preparations into her lessons, having students calculate bushels of apples needed for pies, write essays about harvest traditions, and design decorations that now adorned the town square. By Saturday afternoon, as Zara stood in front of the small mirror in her boarding house room, she felt a flutter of anticipation that had nothing to do with the festival itself, and everything to do with the man who would soon arrive to escort her. She'd splurged on fabric for a new dress, deep burgundy wool that complemented her dark hair and brought warmth to her complexion. Mrs. Abernathy had helped her alter the pattern to include a slightly more fashionable silhouette than Zara might have chosen on her own. "He won't know what hit him," the older woman had declared with satisfaction after the final fitting. Now, pinning the last strands of her hair into a simple but elegant style, Zara tried to temper her expectations. This was a friendly outing, nothing more. The fact that her heart raced at the mere thought of spending an evening with Jack was a complication she would simply have to manage. The knock on the front door came precisely at 4 o'clock. Zara took a deep breath, checked her appearance one last time, and made her way downstairs. What she didn't expect was the absolute silence that fell over the boarding house parlor as she descended. Mrs. Abernathy and the other boarders, all dressed for the festival themselves, stared at her with varying expressions of approval and, in Dr. Peterson's case, fatherly pride. But it was Jack's reaction that stole her breath. He stood just inside the door, hat in hand, dressed in what was clearly his finest clothing: dark trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a vest that brought out the blue of his eyes. Those eyes widened appreciably as they took in her appearance, a muscle working in his jaw as he seemed to struggle for words. "Miss Daniels," he finally managed, his voice slightly hoarse, "you look absolutely beautiful." The simple sincerity in his voice sent warmth coursing through her. "Thank you, Mr. Reid. You look quite handsome yourself." A throat cleared pointedly, and Zara realized they'd been staring at each other while the room's other occupants watched with barely concealed amusement. "Well then," Mrs. Abernathy said briskly, "we should all get going." Wouldn't want to miss the opening speech. Outside, the late afternoon sun bathed Silver Creek in golden light. The town had transformed overnight, with harvest decorations adorning every building, lanterns strung between posts ready to be lit at dusk, and the town square cleared for dancing. Delicious scents wafted from food stalls, and children darted about in excited groups. Jack offered Zara his arm, which she accepted with only slight hesitation. "I should warn you," he said as they walked toward the square, "being seen with me like this is going to set tongues wagging even more than they already are." "I'm beginning to think that's unavoidable in a town this size," Zara replied with a small smile. "Besides, I've never been one to make decisions based on others' opinions." His answering smile was warm with approval. "That's one of the things I admire most about you." The casual admission made her heart skip. Before she could respond, they were approached by a middle-aged couple Zara recognized as the Millers, Thomas's parents. "Miss Daniels," Mrs. Miller greeted her warmly. "I wanted to thank you personally for the extra time you've been spending with Thomas. His reading has improved so much already." "He's a bright boy," Zara replied honestly. "Once we found books that interested him, the rest came naturally." Mr. Miller nodded respectfully to Jack. "Reid, good to see you, Miller. How's that new plow working out for you?" As the men fell into conversation about farming equipment, Mrs. Miller leaned closer to Zara. "I must say, you two make a striking couple. Half the women in town are green with envy, seeing Jack Reid finally showing serious interest in someone." "Oh, we're not," Zara began automatically, then stopped herself. What were they exactly? Friends seemed inadequate to describe the connection she felt with Jack, yet anything more remained unspoken between them. Mrs. Miller patted her arm knowingly. "Of course, dear, take your time, but between us, I haven't seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." With that parting comment, she collected her husband and moved on to greet other townspeople. The festival officially began with a speech from Mayor Thompson, followed by a blessing from Reverend Clark. Then the band struck up a lively tune, and couples began filling the dance area. Jack turned to Zara with a questioning look. "Would you care to dance, Miss Daniels?" "I'd be delighted, Mr. Reid," she replied, her formal tone belied by the smile she couldn't suppress. Jack led her onto the makeshift dance floor, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers. He was a surprisingly graceful dancer for such a tall man, guiding her confidently through the steps. Zara was acutely aware of his proximity, the warmth of his hand at her waist, the subtle scent of soap and leather that she'd come to associate with him. "You dance very well," she observed as they moved in perfect rhythm. "My mother insisted both her sons learn properly, said no woman wants a man who steps on her toes." His expression grew nostalgic. "She would have liked you, I think, strong, independent, passionate about education." "I wish I could have met her," Zara said sincerely. "Me too." His eyes held hers, something unspoken passing between them that made her breath catch. "She would have told me not to waste time when I found someone special." Before Zara could process this statement, the music ended, and they were separated by the movement of dancers around them. The moment broken, Jack led her from the dance floor. "Would you like something to drink?" he asked. "Mrs. Johnson's apple cider is famous throughout the territory." "That sounds wonderful," Zara agreed, grateful for the chance to collect her thoughts. As Jack moved toward the refreshment table, Zara found herself approached by Jessica Harrington, resplendent in a fashionable green dress that must have come directly from Denver or even Chicago. "Miss Daniels," Jessica greeted her, her tone artificially sweet. "What a lovely dress, so quaint." Zara refused to be baited. "Thank you, Miss Harrington, you look beautiful as always." Jessica's smile tightened. "I couldn't help but notice you and Jack seem quite friendly." She glanced toward where Jack stood chatting with Mr. Holloway while waiting for cider. "I feel I should warn you, as someone who's known him his entire life. Jack has always had a soft spot for new arrivals in town, especially those who seem to need rescuing." The implication was clear, and Zara felt a flash of indignation. "How thoughtful of you to concern yourself with my feelings," she replied evenly. "But I assure you I'm perfectly capable of managing my own relationships." Jessica's eyes narrowed slightly. "Of course. I simply wouldn't want you to misinterpret his natural kindness for something more substantial." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You see, there are certain understandings between our families that predate your arrival." Before Zara could respond to this thinly veiled claim, Jack returned with 2 cups of cider. His expression cooled noticeably at the sight of Jessica. "Jessica," he greeted her with a nod. "Enjoying the festival?" "Immensely," Jessica replied, her demeanor instantly transforming to warm affection. "Though it would be even better with the right company." She placed a hand on his arm. "Save me a dance later." Jack carefully extracted himself from her touch. "My dance card is rather full tonight, I'm afraid." Jessica's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Another time, then." "Enjoy your evening." She departed with a final meaningful glance at Zara. "Sorry about that," Jack said quietly as he handed Zara her cider. "Jessica can be territorial." Zara suggested, taking a sip of the drink, which was indeed delicious. Jack grimaced. That's one way to put it. She mentioned the understanding between our families, I take it. She did. There's no understanding, he said firmly. At least, not on my part. My father and hers were friends, and they always hoped we'd join the families through marriage. But I've never encouraged her to think that would happen. The vehemence in his tone was reassuring, though Zara chided herself for caring so much. You don't owe me any explanations, Jack. Maybe not, he agreed, his expression softening as he looked at her, but I want you to know anyway. He hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Would you walk with me? There's something I'd like to show you. Curiosity piqued, Zara nodded. Jack led her away from the main festivities down a side street toward the edge of town. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached a small rise overlooking Silver Creek. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, the town below them coming alive with lanterns as darkness began to fall. It's beautiful, Zara breathed, taking in the panoramic view. This is my favorite spot in town, Jack said, standing close beside her. My father used to bring me here when I was a boy, whenever we'd come in from the ranch. He'd point to the valley and the mountains beyond and say, remember this view, Jackson. This is what we're building for. Not just for ourselves, but for everyone who calls this place home. The personal glimpse into his childhood touched Zara deeply. He sounds like a wise man. He was. Jack turned to face her, his expression earnest in the fading light. Zara, I've been trying to respect your wishes to be your friend first, to give you time to establish yourself here without complications. But I'm finding it harder every day to pretend that what I feel for you is simple friendship. Her heart began to race at his words, at the intensity in his blue eyes as they held hers. Jack, you don't have to say anything, he continued quickly. I just needed you to know. From the moment I found you by that boulder, something in me recognized something in you. Like I'd been waiting for you without even knowing it. Zara's breath caught at the raw honesty in his voice. No man had ever spoken to her this way with such unguarded emotion, such genuine regard. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, Jack said softly. But I wanted to be clear about where I stand, about what I hope for. The distant music from the festival floated up to them, a gentle melody carried on the evening breeze. Zara knew she stood at a crossroads. The sensible path would be to maintain the boundaries they'd established, to focus on her teaching, to build her independence before entangling her heart with anyone else's. But standing there with Jack, his face illuminated by the last rays of sunset, the truth she'd been avoiding for weeks finally broke free. I feel it too, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. This connection between us. I've tried to be practical, to remind myself why I came here, but Jack took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cooling evening air. But, he prompted gently, but my heart doesn't seem interested in being practical where you're concerned. The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, gradual, then blindingly brilliant. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he raised a hand to her cheek, his thumb gently tracing her jawline. May I kiss you, Zara Daniels? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. Her answer was to rise slightly on her toes, closing the distance between them. His lips met hers with exquisite gentleness at first, a question more than a demand. When she responded, her hands coming up to rest against his chest, the kiss deepened, becoming a conversation, an exploration, a promise. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Jack rested his forehead against hers. I've been wanting to do that since the first day, he confessed. Zara laughed softly, even covered in dust from the road and half terrified, especially then. He smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. You were so fierce, so determined, I knew right then you were something special. A cheer went up from the town square, followed by applause, reminding them of the festival continuing without them. Jack reluctantly straightened, though he kept one arm around her waist. We should probably head back before they send a search party, he said with regret. Zara nodded, though part of her wished they could stay in this perfect moment, away from curious eyes and town gossip. As if reading her thoughts, Jack pressed a final quick kiss to her lips. This is just the beginning, he promised. We have time. As they walked back toward the lights and music of the festival, Zara felt a sense of rightness settle over her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and in a small town like Silver Creek, there would certainly be some they would face them together. By the time they rejoined the festivities, the dancing was in full swing. Jack led Zara straight to the dance floor, and as they moved together in perfect rhythm, something in their expressions, in the way they held each other, must have communicated the change in their relationship. Glances were exchanged among the townspeople, some approving, others speculative, a few openly envious. "People are staring," Zara murmured, though she couldn't bring herself to care too much. Jack's smile was unconcerned. "Let them. I'm not hiding how I feel about you, Zara, not anymore." And as they danced under the stars, with lantern light casting a golden glow over the celebration, Zara knew that Silver Creek, this small, gossip-prone town in the Montana Territory, had somehow become exactly where she was meant to be. The weeks following the Harvest Festival brought changes to Zara's life that she could never have anticipated when she first arrived in Silver Creek. Her relationship with Jack blossomed openly, much to the delight of most townspeople, and the barely concealed disappointment of Jessica Harrington and several other single women. He called for her after school several times a week, taking her on rides through the spectacular autumn landscape, bringing her to the Triple R Ranch to meet his brother James and see the operation that had been in his family for generations. The ranch itself was impressive, thousands of acres stretching from valley to mountainside, with a substantial main house built of timber and stone, bunkhouses for the ranch hands, and various outbuildings. The main house revealed much about Jack's upbringing, filled with books, quality furniture that had weathered decades of use, and family heirlooms that spoke of permanence and tradition. "My great-grandfather built the original cabin," Jack explained as he showed her through the house. "Each generation has added to it. My father put in the east wing when James and I were born." "It's beautiful," Zara said sincerely, running her hand along a polished banister. "You can feel the history here." "It needs a woman's touch, though," James commented with a meaningful glance between her and Jack that made Zara blush. James Reid was cut from the same handsome cloth as his brother, though with a more carefree manner that came from having fewer responsibilities. "Don't start, James," Jack warned good-naturedly. "You'll scare her off." But Zara wasn't scared, not of the implications in James's teasing, nor of the increasingly serious nature of her feelings for Jack. What did occasionally give her pause was how quickly her carefully constructed plans for independence had shifted to include him. She'd come to Silver Creek to establish herself as a teacher, to build a life on her own terms after years of caring for her ailing father. Now, just months into that journey, she found herself deeply attached to a man who was becoming essential to her happiness. "You're thinking too hard again," Jack observed one Sunday afternoon as they walked along the creek that gave the town its name. The November air was crisp, their breath forming small clouds with each exhalation. "I can practically hear the wheels turning," Zara smiled, squeezing his hand. "Just reflecting on how different my life is from what I expected when I arrived here. Different bad or different good?" He asked, a hint of vulnerability in his tone that still surprised her, coming from someone who appeared so confident to the rest of the world. "Different wonderful," she assured him, stopping to face him fully. "I never expected you, Jack Reid. You weren't part of my plan." Relief softened his features. "Plans change." "Yes, they do." She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw, rough with stubble. "And sometimes what we find is better than what we were looking for." His kiss was gentle, reverent, warming her despite the chill in the air. When they parted, his expression had grown more serious. "Zara, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." Her heart quickened at his tone. "Yes, Thanksgiving is in 2 weeks. I'd like you to come to the ranch for dinner as my guest, officially meeting the family. James will be there, and so will our Aunt Margaret from Bozeman, and a few close friends." Though not the question her racing heart had anticipated, Zara recognized the significance of the invitation. In Silver Creek's social landscape, being formally introduced to family was a clear statement of intentions. "I'd be honored," she said, watching his face light up with pleasure. Good, that's good. He seemed uncharacteristically nervous, which she found endearing. There's something else. I've been meaning to give you this. From his pocket, he withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Zara unwrapped it carefully to find a beautiful leather-bound copy of Jane Eyre. Open it, Jack urged softly. Inside the cover was an inscription in elegant handwriting. To my dearest Jackson, on his 18th birthday. Remember that love when true recognizes its equal in another soul. With all my love, Mother. Beneath this, in Jack's more angular script, for Zara, who I recognized from the first moment. All my love, Jack. Emotion welled in Zara's throat as she traced the words with her fingertip. Jack, I can't accept this. It was from your mother. Which is exactly why I want you to have it, he said firmly. She would have wanted it this way. The book found its way to the right person, someone who understands what it means to forge your own path, to seek connection without sacrificing who you are. His eyes held hers intently. Someone I love. The declaration, though perhaps inevitable given the trajectory of their relationship, still took her breath away. Jack, you don't have to say it back, he said quickly. I just needed you to know. Zara closed the distance between them, the book clutched carefully in one hand while the other came up to touch his face. I love you too, she said simply, the truth of it resonating through her entire being. How could I not? The kiss that followed was different from their previous ones, deeper, more certain, filled with promises neither spoke aloud but both understood. When they finally broke apart, Jack pressed his forehead against hers, his breath uneven. You have no idea how happy you make me, Zara Daniels. She smiled, her heart fuller than she'd ever thought possible. I think I might have some idea. The walk back to town was filled with a new awareness, a sense of having crossed an important threshold together. As they approached the boarding house, Jack suddenly tensed beside her, his hand tightening on hers. What is it? Zara asked, following his gaze to where a sleek black carriage stood outside Mrs. Abernathy's establishment. That's the Harrington carriage, Jack said, his expression growing concerned. What would William Harrington be doing here? They quickened their pace, and as they reached the boarding house, the door opened to reveal Mr. Harrington himself, a distinguished man in his 60s with steel gray hair and an imperious bearing. His eyes narrowed slightly at the sight of them, particularly their clasped hands. Reid, he acknowledged with a curt nod. Miss Daniels. I was just speaking with your landlady about some town business. Good day to you both. With that, he descended the steps and climbed into his waiting carriage. What was that about? Zara wondered aloud as they watched the carriage pull away. Jack's expression was troubled. I'm not sure, but William Harrington doesn't make social calls without a purpose. Inside, they found Mrs. Abernathy in the kitchen, furiously kneading bread dough with more force than the task required. She looked up as they entered, her usually cheerful face pinched with anger. That man, she muttered. The nerve of him. What did Mr. Harrington want, Mrs. Abernathy? Jack asked gently. The older woman wiped flour-covered hands on her apron. He came with concerns about the propriety of the schoolteacher's living arrangements, if you can believe it. Said several parents had approached him about the example being set for their children. What example? Zara asked, bewildered. I've been nothing but professional. It's not about your teaching, dear, Mrs. Abernathy said with a sigh. It's about you and Jack. Apparently, your relationship has become the subject of inappropriate speculation that might undermine your authority with the students. Her voice dripped with sarcasm as she quoted Harrington's words. Jack's jaw tightened. This is Jessica's doing. She's using her father to interfere. Mrs. Abernathy snorted in agreement. Of course it is. That girl's been after you for years, and she doesn't like being outshone by our Zara here. But what exactly is Mr. Harrington suggesting? Zara asked, a knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. Mrs. Abernathy's expression softened with sympathy. He mentioned that the school board might need to reevaluate the suitability of your position if the situation continues to generate gossip. That's outrageous, Jack exclaimed, anger flashing in his eyes. They can't threaten her job because of who she chooses to spend time with. They shouldn't, Mrs. Abernathy agreed, but William Harrington has significant influence with the school board. As the town's main financial benefactor, his opinion carries weight. Zara sank into a kitchen chair, her earlier happiness evaporating. So I'm being asked to choose between my profession and my personal life. No, Jack said firmly, kneeling beside her chair to take her hands in his. You're not choosing anything. This is intimidation, plain and simple, and I won't stand for it. He looked up at Mrs. Abernathy. Did Harrington speak to the rest of the school board about this? Not yet, according to what he said. He claimed he wanted to address the matter discreetly first. Jack nodded, a determined look settling over his features. Then we have time to act. I'm going to speak with Edward Holloway immediately. He squeezed Zara's hands. Don't worry, we'll resolve this. But as Jack strode out with purpose in every line of his body, Zara couldn't help the worry that settled like a stone in her chest. She'd worked so hard to build her reputation as a teacher, to earn the respect of the community. The thought that it could all be jeopardized because of her relationship with Jack seemed profoundly unfair. Yet the alternative, giving up the man she'd come to love, was unthinkable. What am I going to do? She asked softly, more to herself than to Mrs. Abernathy. The older woman sat across from her, reaching out to pat her hand. You're going to hold your head high and remember that you've done nothing wrong, and you're going to trust Jack. That man loves you something fierce, Zara. He won't let anyone come between you. As evening fell, Zara sat in the boarding house parlor, attempting to focus on grading student essays, but finding her mind constantly returning to the day's unsettling developments. Jack had not yet returned from his mission to speak with Mr. Holloway, and her imagination conjured increasingly worrisome scenarios. The front door opened, and Zara looked up expectantly, only to find Widow Wilson entering instead of Jack. The older woman's normally cheerful expression was serious as she removed her shawl and came to sit beside Zara. I heard what happened, she said without preamble. News travels fast, especially when William Harrington's carriage is seen at your doorstep. Zara sighed, setting aside her work. Then you know I'm apparently causing a scandal simply by walking out with Jack Reid. Nonsense, Widow Wilson said firmly. What you're doing is threatening Jessica Harrington's carefully constructed plans. That girl has been positioning herself as the future Mrs. Reid since she was 16 years old. So this is all because of jealousy, Zara asked incredulously. Jealousy and pride, the widow confirmed. And money, of course. The Harringtons and the Reids are the two wealthiest families in the county. William has been counting on that merger through marriage for years. Zara shook her head, dismayed. I never meant to become entangled in all this. I just came here to teach. And then you met Jack, Widow Wilson said with gentle understanding. And discovered that the heart doesn't always follow the path we've laid out for it. What should I do? Zara asked, grateful for the older woman's wisdom. Widow Wilson considered for a moment. Stand your ground. You're a fine teacher, Zara. The children adore you, and most parents recognize the positive change you've brought to the school. Don't let Harrington bully you into retreating from a relationship that brings you joy. Before Zara could respond, the front door opened again, and this time it was Jack who entered, accompanied by Edward Holloway. Both men looked grim but determined as they joined the women in the parlor. Zara, Jack said, coming immediately to her side. Edward has something to tell you, Mr. Holloway cleared his throat uncomfortably. Miss Daniels, I want to assure you that your position at the school is not in jeopardy. Whatever William Harrington may have implied, he does not speak for the entire school board. Relief flooded through Zara. Thank you, Mr. Holloway. That said, he continued carefully, I can't deny that there has been talk. Some parents have expressed concern about the example being set for their children. What example? Zara asked, frustration edging her voice. That a woman can have both a career and a personal life. That's hardly scandalous. I agree with you, Mr. Holloway said quickly, and so do many others. But Silver Creek is still a small town with traditional values. The speed and public nature of your relationship with Jack has raised eyebrows. Jack's hand found Zara's, gripping it tightly. We've done nothing improper, he stated firmly. No, you haven't, Mr. Holloway agreed, which is why the school board has no grounds to interfere. I've made that clear to William, though I doubt he's pleased about it. What happens now? Zara asked, trying to process this information, Mr. Holloway sighed. Frankly, this will likely blow over if given time. People will find something new to gossip about, especially with the holidays approaching. In the meantime, perhaps a bit more discretion might be advisable. The suggestion, though well-intentioned, rankled. You're asking us to hide our relationship, Zara said flatly. Not hide, Mr. Holloway corrected hastily. Just, perhaps keep public displays of affection to a minimum for a while. Give people time to adjust to the idea. Jack's expression had darkened during this exchange. This isn't right, Edward. Zara shouldn't have to compromise her happiness to appease gossips and satisfy William Harrington's ambitions for his daughter. I agree, Mr. Holloway said, surprising them both, but I'm trying to be practical. The school needs Zara. The children need her. And sometimes in small communities like ours, change has to come gradually. A tense silence fell over the room as they all considered the situation. Finally, Widow Wilson spoke up. There might be another solution, she said thoughtfully. One that would silence the critics while allowing you both to follow your hearts. All eyes turned to her expectantly. Marriage, she stated simply. If your relationship is official in the eyes of the community, the gossip becomes moot. A married schoolteacher is perfectly respectable, even expected. Zara's breath caught at the suggestion, her eyes darting to Jack's face to gauge his reaction. His expression had shifted from anger to intense consideration, those blue eyes fixed on her with such focused attention that she felt her cheeks warm. It's certainly a solution, Mr. Holloway mused, though perhaps a bit precipitous, given the circumstances. Jack hadn't taken his eyes off Zara. Not if it's what we both want anyway, he said quietly. The words meant only for her despite their audience. The implication sent Zara's heart racing. They'd only known each other for 3 months, had only acknowledged their feelings weeks ago. Yet the connection between them had been immediate, undeniable from that first meeting. And hadn't she already recognized, deep down, that Jack Reid was meant to be part of her future? I should leave you two to discuss this privately, Mr. Holloway said, rising from his seat. Whatever you decide, Miss Daniels, please know that your position at the school is secure as long as I have any say in the matter. Widow Wilson stood as well. I'll walk out with you, Edward. I believe these young people have much to talk about. She gave Zara an encouraging smile before following Mr. Holloway from the room. When they were alone, Jack moved to sit beside Zara on the settee, taking both her hands in his. I want to be clear about something, he said, his voice low and intent. I don't want to marry you because of William Harrington or town gossip or to solve a problem. I want to marry you because I love you. Because I knew from the moment I found you by that boulder that you were the woman I'd been waiting for my entire life. Emotion welled in Zara's throat, making it difficult to speak. Jack, I was planning to ask you at Christmas, he continued, his thumbs tracing circles on the backs of her hands. I even have my grandmother's ring in the safe at the ranch. But Widow Wilson is right. Why wait when we both know what we want? Zara's mind whirled with the suddenness of it all, yet beneath the surprise was a bedrock of certainty that this was right. People will say you're only marrying me to silence the gossip, she pointed out. Jack's smile was tender. Let them talk, we'll know the truth, and in time so will everyone else. His expression grew more serious. But only if this is what you want, Zara. I won't pressure you into marriage before you're ready, no matter what the town thinks. Zara looked into his eyes, so full of love and sincerity, and found her answer there. I want to be your wife, Jack Reid, she said softly. Not because of what anyone else thinks or says, but because I love you. The joy that spread across his face was breathtaking. Is that a yes, then? Yes, she whispered, just before his lips claimed hers in a kiss that felt like a promise, a beginning, a future unfolding before them. When they finally parted, Jack rested his forehead against hers. I'll ride out to the ranch first thing tomorrow to get the ring. And then we'll make it official if you're certain, Zara nodded, her heart full to bursting. I've never been more certain of anything. As Jack gathered her into his arms, Zara marveled at the unexpected turn her life had taken. She'd come to Silver Creek seeking independence, a chance to define herself on her own terms. Instead, she'd found a partnership that strengthened rather than diminished her, a love that expanded her world rather than limiting it. And in that moment, with Jack's heartbeat steady beneath her cheek, she knew she'd found the rarest kind of freedom. The freedom to be fully herself, fully loved, exactly where she was meant to be. True to his word, Jack rode out to the Triple R Ranch at dawn the next morning, returning to town by mid-afternoon with a small velvet box and his brother James in tow. The official proposal happened on the schoolhouse steps after classes had been dismissed, with Jack down on one knee and a cluster of delighted students watching from a distance. The ring, a sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds, slipped perfectly onto Zara's finger, as if it had been made for her all along. "It matches your eyes," she observed, admiring how the blue stone caught the light. "That's what my grandfather always said about why he chose it for my grandmother," Jack replied, rising to kiss her lightly, mindful of their young audience. "They were married for 52 years. A good omen," Zara said with a smile. News of their engagement spread through Silver Creek with predictable speed. By supper time, it seemed everyone in town knew. The reactions were mixed but predominantly positive congratulations from most, knowing smiles from those who had seen the match coming from the beginning, and of course, barely concealed displeasure from the Harrington family. "Jessica looked like she'd swallowed a lemon when I told her," James reported with undisguised glee when he joined them for dinner at the boarding house. And old William turned purple, thought he might have an apoplexy right there in the bank. "James," Jack admonished, though his tone lacked conviction, "we're not celebrating anyone's disappointment. Speak for yourself, brother," James replied, raising his glass in a toast. "I've been waiting years for you to find a woman who could match you." To Zara, who finally managed the impossible. Mrs. Abernathy and the other boarders joined enthusiastically in the toast, their genuine happiness for the couple providing a buffer against whatever negative reactions might be circulating elsewhere in town. Later that evening, as they sat together on the boarding house porch, Jack brought up the question of timing. "How soon would you like to be married?" Zara considered the question. The practical side of her suggested waiting until summer, when school was not in session. But another part of her, the part that had already waited a lifetime to find Jack, was reluctant to delay. "What about Christmas?" she suggested. "The school has a 2-week holiday and it would give us time for a proper honeymoon." Jack's smile was immediate and approving. "Christmas it is." He squeezed her hand. "And for our honeymoon? Would you like to see San Francisco or perhaps Denver?" "Actually," Zara said, surprising herself with the certainty of her answer, "I'd like to go to the ranch, to start our life together in the place that will be our home." The look Jack gave her was so full of love it nearly took her breath away. "I was hoping you'd say that," he admitted. "The Triple R is part of who I am. Having you there, making it our home together, that's everything I want." As they planned their wedding over the following weeks, Zara found herself increasingly drawn to the idea of life at the ranch. She loved teaching and had no intention of giving it up, but the prospect of balancing her career with building a life alongside Jack filled her with anticipation rather than anxiety. Arrangements were made for her to continue teaching after their marriage, with Jack providing transportation to and from town during the winter months when weather made daily travel challenging. The school board, perhaps motivated by a desire to make amends for the Harrington incident, readily agreed to the arrangement. "A married teacher brings stability to the position," Mr. Holloway declared when finalizing the details. "And happy teachers make better educators." The wedding was set for December 23rd in the town church, with Reverend Clark officiating. Martha Peterson and Widow Wilson helped Zara prepare, ordering fabric from Denver for a wedding gown and assisting with the countless details of planning a celebration that had grown to include nearly the entire town. "Everyone wants to be part of this, Mrs. Abernathy explained when Zara expressed surprise at the enthusiastic response to their invitations. "It's not every day Silver Creek's most eligible bachelor gets married, especially not to someone the whole town has come to admire." Jessica Harrington and her family were conspicuously absent from the list of those who had accepted the invitation, though Zara couldn't bring herself to feel anything but relief at this development. As the wedding day approached, An unexpected snowstorm blanketed Silver Creek in white, transforming the town into a winter wonderland that only enhanced the festive atmosphere. Evergreen boughs and red ribbons decorated the church, and candles in every window created a warm glow against the early darkness of the December evening. In Mrs. Abernathy's best guest room, which had been transformed into a bridal preparation area, Zara stood before the mirror in her wedding dress, ivory satin with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, her dark hair arranged in an elegant updo adorned with tiny white flowers. "You look absolutely beautiful," Martha Peterson said, adjusting the small train. "Jack won't know what hit him." "I still can't believe this is happening," Zara admitted, touching the sapphire ring that had become so familiar on her hand in just a few short weeks. 3 months ago, I didn't even know Jack existed. Now I can't imagine my life without him." "When it's right," Widow Wilson said with the confidence of experience. "My Harold proposed after knowing me 6 weeks. We had 41 wonderful years together." Her eyes grew misty with memory. "Time isn't the measure of love, dear. It's how completely two souls recognize each other." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Mrs. Abernathy opened it to reveal Edward Holloway, looking distinguished in his Sunday best. "It's time," he said with a warm smile. "Everyone's assembled." With no family of her own present, Zara had asked Mr. Holloway to give her away a request he had accepted with tears in his eyes, confessing that, with 5 sons and no daughters, he'd never expected to have the honor. Now, as she took his arm and prepared to walk down the aisle, Zara felt a surge of gratitude for the community that had embraced her so completely. Silver Creek might be small, prone to gossip, and occasionally set in its ways, but it had become her home in every way that mattered. The church doors opened, and the assembled guests rose to their feet. At the altar, Jack waited with his brother beside him as best man, his expression transforming from nervous anticipation to awestruck wonder as he caught sight of his bride. In that moment, with Jack's eyes fixed on her as if she were the only person in the world, Zara knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, their voices steady as they pledged their lives to one another. When Reverend Clark pronounced them husband and wife, Jack's kiss was reverent yet filled with promise, drawing good-natured cheers from the congregation. The celebration that followed at the town hall was joyous, filled with music, dancing, and enough food to feed half the territory, courtesy of contributions from nearly every household in Silver Creek. Jack and Zara moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes, their hands rarely separating throughout the evening. "Mrs. Reid," Jack murmured during a quiet moment, testing the sound of her new name. "I still can't quite believe you're my wife." Zara smiled up at him, her heart full. "Believe it, Mr. Reid. You're stuck with me now." "Best thing that ever happened to me," he replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. As the evening wore on, snow began falling again, large flakes drifting past the windows in a gentle curtain of white. Some guests departed early, concerned about the journey home in the worsening weather. "Perhaps we should consider staying in town tonight," Jack suggested, watching the snow accumulate. "The ranch is a fair distance in these conditions," but Zara shook her head, determined. "No, I want to go home to our home, unless you think it's truly unsafe." Jack's expression softened at her words. "Not unsafe, just challenging, but if you're certain." He glanced outside again, then nodded decisively. "We'll go tonight. James can follow with your trunks tomorrow when the weather clears." As they prepared to depart, changing into warmer traveling clothes and saying their goodbyes, Mrs. Abernathy pressed a package into Zara's hands. "A little something to keep you warm on the journey," she said with a wink that made Zara blush. "And remember, dear, marriage is a partnership, equal in all things, including happiness." The sleigh that waited outside had been decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons, the horses adorned with bells that jingled merrily as they stamped their feet in the snow. Jack helped Zara in, tucking warm buffalo robes around them both before taking the reins. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Reid?" he asked, his smile visible even in the dim light from the lanterns that hung from the sleigh. "Ready," Zara confirmed, her heart swelling with love for this man who had so unexpectedly become the center of her world. As the sleigh pulled away from the town hall, their friends and neighbors spilled onto the porch, calling final good wishes and throwing rice that mingled with the falling snow. Zara turned to wave one last time, catching sight of Widow Wilson's knowing smile and Mrs. Abernathy's tearful happiness. Then they were beyond the town limits, the only sounds the crunch of runners on snow and the rhythmic jingling of the harness bells. The night was magical, the landscape transformed into a glittering wonderland under the full moon that occasionally broke through the clouds, the air crisp and clean, the world seemingly created just for them. Jack guided the horses with confident hands, occasionally glancing at Zara with an expression of such happiness it made her heart ache with the perfection of the moment. "Cold?" he asked after they'd been traveling for some time. "Not at all," she replied truthfully. Between the buffalo robes, the warming bricks at their feet, and Jack's solid presence beside her, Zara had never felt more snug. "We're almost there," he said as they crested a small rise. "Look, you can see the lights." In the distance, the windows of the Triple R ranch house glowed with welcoming light, smoke curling from the chimneys into the night sky. As they drew closer, Zara could see that the porch had been decorated with evergreens and lanterns, creating a festive entrance. "Did you arrange this?" she asked, touched by the thoughtful welcome. Jack nodded. "I wanted everything to be perfect for your first night at the ranch. Mrs. Daniels, our housekeeper, no relation to you, has been preparing for days." The sleigh came to a stop at the front of the house, and before Zara could move, Jack leapt down and came around to her side. Instead of simply helping her down, he scooped her into his arms in one fluid motion. "Jack," she exclaimed with a laugh, "what are you doing?" "Carrying my bride over the threshold," he replied with a grin. "It's tradition." As he carried her up the steps and to the front door, which swung open at their approach, Zara felt a wave of emotion wash over her. This was her home now, this beautiful house, this land, this life with Jack. Inside, a fire blazed in the great stone fireplace of the main room, casting a warm glow over polished wood floors and comfortable furniture. Evergreen boughs decorated the mantelpiece, and a small Christmas tree stood in one corner, adorned with simple ornaments and candles. "Welcome home, Mrs. Reid," came a voice, and Zara turned to see an older woman with a kind face and silver-streaked hair standing in the doorway to what must be the kitchen. "I'm Mrs. Daniels. I've prepared some supper for you both if you're hungry after your journey." "Thank you, Mrs. Daniels," Jack said, finally setting Zara on her feet but keeping an arm around her waist. "This is perfect." The housekeeper beamed at them. "Everything's ready in the dining room. I'll be heading to my cottage now, just ring if you need anything." With a discreet nod, she gathered her shawl and slipped out the side door, leaving the newlyweds alone. "She seems lovely," Zara observed. "She's been with the family since I was a boy," Jack explained, helping Zara remove her heavy traveling cloak. "More like family than staff, really." "She's excited to have a mistress in the house again. It's been too long with just James and me rattling around here." They shared a simple but delicious meal in the dining room, where candles created an intimate atmosphere, and the best china and silver had been laid out in their honor. Afterward, Jack gave Zara a proper tour of the house, ending at the master bedroom, where a fire had been lit in the small fireplace and the bed turned down invitingly. "Our room," Jack said softly, watching her reaction. "Though we can redecorate if you'd like, make it more your own." Zara moved around the spacious room, taking in the sturdy furniture, the large windows that would offer spectacular views in daylight, the personal touches that spoke of Jack's presence. On the bedside table, she noticed a framed photograph, a handsome couple on their wedding day, the woman's features clearly reflected in Jack's own face. "Your parents?" she asked, picking up the frame. Jack nodded, coming to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist. "They were happy here." "I hope we will be too." Zara leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "We already are." His lips found the sensitive spot just below her ear, sending a shiver of anticipation through her. "I love you, Zara Reid," he murmured against her skin. "More than I ever thought possible." She turned in his arms, her hands coming up to frame his face. "Show me," she whispered, and saw his eyes darken with desire before his mouth claimed hers in a kiss that held nothing back. Later, as moonlight filtered through the curtains, and Jack slept peacefully beside her, Zara reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought her to this moment. From the terrifying stagecoach robbery to finding herself in the arms of a man who loved her with a fierce devotion that still took her breath away every step, even the difficult ones, had led her exactly where she needed to be. Outside, snow continued to fall, wrapping the Triple R Ranch in a pristine blanket of white, while inside, wrapped in Jack's embrace, Zara drifted off to sleep, secure in the knowledge that she had found her true home. Spring came early to Montana that year, bringing with it new beginnings that mirrored the rebirth happening across the landscape. For Zara, the transition from winter to spring marked nearly 4 months of marriage, 4 months of balancing her role as a teacher with her new life as Mrs. Jackson Reid. The arrangement they'd worked out had proven surprisingly manageable. On school days, Jack would drive her into town in the morning, returning to the ranch for his own work, then collect her in the afternoon. When weather made daily travel impossible, she would stay at Mrs. Abernathy's for a few days at a time, though both she and Jack found these separations increasingly difficult to bear. "I miss you when you're not here," Jack admitted one evening in early April as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and pink. "The house feels empty without you." Zara squeezed his hand, understanding completely. "I miss you too, but the school year will be over in 2 months and then we'll have the whole summer together." Jack's smile turned thoughtful. "I've been thinking about that. What if we built a small house in town? Nothing fancy, just somewhere you could stay during the worst weather. Somewhere I could join you, rather than both of us being apart." The suggestion touched Zara deeply, another example of how Jack consistently prioritized her happiness and career alongside his own needs and responsibilities. "You do that. Build a second home just for those occasions. I'd do anything for you," he said simply. "Besides, I've been thinking we should have a place in town anyway, for when we start a family. The ride to and from school would be too much for you if..." He trailed off, suddenly looking uncertain. "If I were expecting a child," Zara finished for him, her heart quickening at the thought. They had spoken of children before, both wanting a family, though they'd agreed to wait at least a year before actively trying to conceive. Jack nodded, watching her face carefully. "It's something to consider for the future." Zara leaned against his shoulder, contentment washing over her. "I love that you think of these things, that you're planning for our future together." "Always," he promised, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. The following week brought news that sent ripples through the community. William Harrington announced his intention to retire from active management of the bank, planning to move to Denver, where his wife's family lived. More surprising still was the news that Jessica would be accompanying them, having accepted a marriage proposal from a Denver businessman she'd met during a previous visit. "Well, that's unexpected," Jack remarked when they heard the news at Sunday services. "Though I suppose it explains why Jessica has been absent from most social events these past months." "Are you surprised?" Zara asked, curious about his reaction. Jack considered the question. "Not that she's marrying. Jessica's always been determined to make an advantageous match. More surprised that she's willing to leave Silver Creek. She's always loved being the center of attention here." "Perhaps Denver offers a larger stage," Zara suggested diplomatically. Jack's laugh was warm with affection for his perceptive wife. "Always seeing to the heart of matters, aren't you?" The Harringtons' departure marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another for Silver Creek. Without William's domineering presence on various town committees, new voices began to be heard, including Zara's, on matters related to education. By the time the school year ended in early June, plans were already underway for expansion of the school building to accommodate growing enrollment, with Zara serving as advisor on the design. Her suggestion for a separate reading room, lined with bookshelves and comfortable seating, was enthusiastically approved by the school board. "You've transformed education in this town. Edward Holloway told her proudly during the last board meeting of the term. Enrollment is up, attendance is more consistent, and parents report their children actually look forward to school. The children deserve the credit, Zara replied modestly. They're eager to learn when given the chance. As summer settled over Montana, bringing long, sun-drenched days and cool, star-filled nights, Zara embraced her first extended break from teaching with a mixture of relief and productive energy. She divided her time between helping Jack with the more administrative aspects of running the ranch, riding out with him to check on the herds, and working on curriculum plans for the following school year. It was during one such planning session, as she sat at the desk in the ranch house study surrounded by books and papers, that a wave of dizziness suddenly overcame her. The room seemed to tilt alarmingly, and Zara gripped the edge of the desk until the sensation passed. Zara. Jack's voice came from the doorway, concern evident in his tone. Are you all right? You're pale as a ghost. Just a little lightheaded, she assured him, though her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. I probably just need to eat something. Jack was at her side immediately, his hand cool against her forehead. No fever, he murmured. When did you last eat? Zara tried to remember. Breakfast, I think. I got caught up in these lesson plans. It's nearly 3 o'clock, Jack admonished gently, helping her to her feet. No wonder you're dizzy. Come on, let's get some food in you. But as they reached the kitchen, another wave of dizziness struck, this one accompanied by a surge of nausea so intense that Zara barely made it to the back door before being violently ill. Jack held her hair back, his face a mask of worry. When the sickness passed, he helped her to a kitchen chair and poured a glass of water, which she sipped cautiously. I'm sending for Dr. Peterson, he declared, his tone brooking no argument. It's probably just something I ate, Zara protested weakly. Jack shook his head. You've barely been eating at all lately, I've noticed, even if you haven't, and you've been tired falling asleep in your book every night. His expression softened. Please, Zara. For my peace of mind, if nothing else. Unable to deny the genuine concern in his eyes, Zara nodded. All right, but I'm sure it's nothing serious. Dr. Peterson arrived an hour later, medical bag in hand, his kind face creased with professional concern as Jack explained the symptoms. He examined Zara thoroughly in the privacy of their bedroom, asking questions about her appetite, energy levels, and other matters that gradually led her toward a suspicion of her own. When the examination was complete, the doctor's smile confirmed her growing intuition before he even spoke. Well, Mrs. Reid, it appears congratulations are in order. You're going to have a baby. Though she had begun to suspect as much, hearing the words spoken aloud sent a wave of emotion through Zara, joy, wonder, and a touch of anxiety all mingled together. You're certain? As certain as I can be at this stage, Dr. Peterson confirmed. I'd estimate you're about 8 weeks along, which would put the birth sometime in January. A winter baby, Zara murmured, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. I'll leave you to share the news with your husband, the doctor said with a warm smile. He's wearing a path in the floorboards out there waiting. When Jack entered the room after Dr. Peterson's departure, his expression was a study in barely contained fear and hope. Zara, what did he say? She held out her hand to him, drawing him to sit beside her on the edge of the bed. He says we're going to have a baby. Jack's face transformed, joy breaking across it like sunrise over the mountains. A baby, we're having a baby, Zara nodded, tears of happiness filling her eyes. In January, he thinks. For a moment, Jack seemed incapable of speech, his emotions too overwhelming for words. Then he gathered her gently into his arms, pressing reverent kisses to her hair, her temple, her lips. A baby, he repeated in wonder. Our child. His hand joined hers on her stomach, protective and tender. Are you happy, Zara? Is this what you want? More than anything, she assured him, realizing the truth of it as she spoke. Though they hadn't planned to start their family quite so soon, now that it was happening, Zara couldn't imagine wanting anything else. Are you happy? Jack's laugh was joyous, slightly incredulous. Happy doesn't begin to cover it, I don't even have words, Zara. You've given me everything I never knew I needed, and now this miracle too. As they sat together, hands entwined over the new life growing within her, Zara reflected on how far she had come from that frightened young woman crouching behind a boulder on the road to Silver Creek. What had begun as a desperate bid for independence had transformed into something far richer, a partnership based on mutual respect and profound love, a future filled with promise and purpose. The months of Zara's pregnancy passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Jack insisted on building the house in town immediately, employing every available carpenter to ensure it would be ready well before the baby's arrival. Though modest compared to the ranch house, the two-story structure a short walk from the school was charming and practical, with a nursery adjacent to the master bedroom and a small study where Zara could work on lessons. "This is too much," she protested when Jack showed her the completed house in late August, just before the new school term began. "Nothing is too much for you and our child," he replied firmly. "Besides, we agreed this makes sense for the school year, especially with the baby coming." Indeed, as her pregnancy progressed and her condition became more visible, Zara was grateful for the shorter commute to the schoolhouse. The children were delighted by the news of their teacher's impending motherhood, particularly the younger girls who asked endless questions about the baby and wanted to feel it kick once Zara began showing noticeably. "Will you still be our teacher after the baby comes?" 10-year-old Sarah Miller asked anxiously one day in November as Zara's January due date approached. "Of course," Zara assured her. "I'll need to take some time when the baby first arrives, but Mrs. Peterson has agreed to substitute for me, and I'll be back before you know it." The truth was, Zara had given considerable thought to how she would balance motherhood with her career. The townhouse would make it possible for her to continue teaching while keeping her child close by Mrs. Daniels had agreed to help with childcare during school hours, moving temporarily to town when needed. Jack supported these plans wholeheartedly, his pride in Zara's dedication to her students evident whenever the subject arose. "Our child will have the privilege of seeing their mother change lives through education," he often said. "What better example could we provide?" As Christmas approached and Zara entered her final month of pregnancy, activities at the school wound down for the holiday break. On the last day before vacation, her students surprised her with a handmade quilt for the baby, each child having contributed a square representing something they had learned from her. "We wanted the baby to know how special their mama is to all of us," James Prescott explained gruffly, the once troublesome student now one of her most dedicated. Touched beyond words, Zara had embraced each child, promising to bring the baby to visit once it arrived. By the time Jack came to collect her that afternoon, her emotions were already running high. "Happy tears, I hope?" he asked, helping her into the sleigh for the journey back to the ranch, where they planned to spend the holiday. "The happiest," Zara confirmed, showing him the quilt. "Look what the children made." Jack examined it with genuine appreciation. "This is incredible. Each square tells a story." "Just like our lives together," Zara observed, leaning against his shoulder as the sleigh moved through the snow-covered landscape. The Triple R Ranch was at its most beautiful in winter, the vast expanse of white broken only by the dark lines of fences and the silhouettes of cattle in the sheltered pastures. The house itself glowed with warmth and light, evergreen boughs and red ribbons decorating the porch just as they had on their wedding night a year earlier. Christmas Eve found them gathered in the main room with James and Mrs. Daniels, exchanging gifts by the light of the fire and the candles on the tree. Jack saved his gift to Zara for last, a beautifully crafted wooden cradle, the headboard carved with the intertwined initials of the Reid family. "Jack, it's beautiful," Zara breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "Did you make this yourself?" He nodded, a hint of self-consciousness in his expression. "I've been working on it in the evenings, out in the workshop. My father made one for me when I was born. It seemed fitting to continue the tradition." The thoughtfulness of the gift moved her deeply. In it, she saw not just Jack's love for their unborn child, but his connection to his own past and his hopes for their future together. This continuity, this sense of belonging to something larger than herself, was perhaps the greatest gift Silver Creek and Jack had given her. As they lay in bed that night, the house quiet around them, Zara felt the baby move restlessly within her. Jack's hand rested on the swell of her stomach, his touch gentle as he felt the movements of their child. "Not much longer now," he murmured, wonder still evident in his voice after all these months. "A few more weeks," Zara agreed, though something in her tone must have alerted him. Jack propped himself up on one elbow, studying her face in the dim light from the banked fire. "What is it? Are you worried about the birth?" Zara shook her head. "Not exactly. More, reflecting on how much has changed in just 1 year. Last Christmas, I didn't even know you existed. Now you're my husband, and we're about to become parents." She placed her hand over his where it rested on her belly. "Sometimes it feels like a dream." "The best kind of dream," Jack said softly, pressing a kiss to her temple, "one we never have to wake from." As it happened, their child was impatient to join the world, arriving not in January as expected but on the day after Christmas. The labor began in the early morning hours, startling Zara from sleep with its intensity. By the time Dr. Peterson arrived, summoned by a frantic James who had ridden through the pre-dawn darkness, she was well advanced in the process. Jack remained by her side throughout, his steady presence a lifeline during the most difficult moments. When their daughter finally made her entrance in the late afternoon, red-faced and squalling, with a shock of dark hair that promised to be as rich as her mother's, the look of awestruck love on Jack's face, as he held her for the first time, was something Zara knew she would remember until her dying day. "She's perfect," he whispered, carefully returning the swaddled infant to Zara's arms. "Absolutely perfect." They named her Elizabeth Margaret Reid, Elizabeth for Zara's mother and Margaret for Jack's. But from the first, they called her Eliza, a name that seemed to suit her determined personality and bright, curious eyes. Word of Eliza's birth spread quickly through Silver Creek, and in the days that followed, a steady stream of visitors made their way to the ranch, bearing gifts and good wishes for the new family. Mrs. Abernathy brought a feast that kept them fed for days. Widow Wilson arrived with books specifically selected for reading aloud to infants. The school children sent handmade cards and small toys. "I've never seen such a fuss over a baby," Mrs. Daniels remarked as she helped organize the gifts that continued to arrive. "It's not just any baby," James pointed out, already hopelessly devoted to his tiny niece. "It's Jack and Zara's baby. The whole town's been invested in their story from the beginning." Indeed, as spring arrived and Zara gradually resumed her teaching duties, bringing Eliza with her to the townhouse where Mrs. Daniels cared for her during school hours, she became aware of how thoroughly she and Jack had become woven into the fabric of Silver Creek. Their love story had somehow transcended personal boundaries to become part of the community's shared narrative, a tale of serendipitous meeting, unexpected connection, and enduring commitment that people recounted to visitors with proprietary pride. "Have you heard about our schoolteacher and the rancher?" They would begin, and the story that followed, though often embellished in the telling, captured the essence of what had happened between Zara and Jack. A love so fierce and true that it had transformed not just their lives, but touched everyone around them. 5 years after Zara's arrival in Silver Creek, as she stood on the porch of the Triple R Ranch watching Jack teach their daughter to ride her first pony, with their 3-year-old son Daniel attempting to help and baby Rebecca sleeping peacefully in her cradle nearby, she reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought her to this moment of perfect contentment. "Mama, look," Eliza called excitedly as the pony trotted in a small circle, Jack walking alongside with a lead rope, his free hand steadying his daughter in the saddle. "I'm riding like Papa, I see you, sweetheart," Zara called back, her heart full to bursting with love for her family. "You're doing wonderfully." Later that evening, with the children finally asleep after stories and goodnight kisses, Zara and Jack sat together on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the vast Montana sky. His arm around her shoulders, her head resting against him, they enjoyed a rare moment of peaceful silence. "Happy?" Jack asked softly, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Completely," Zara replied without hesitation. "Are you?" His answer was to turn her face gently toward his, capturing her lips in a kiss that, even after years of marriage, still made her heart race and her breath catch. When they parted, his blue eyes held the same intensity, the same devotion they had from the very beginning. "I never thought I could be this happy," he admitted. "You gave me everything, Zara, a partner, a family, a purpose beyond just working the land." "We gave each other those things," she corrected gently. "That's what love is supposed to be, each person making the other more completely themselves." Jack smiled, the expression softening the lines that years of working outdoors had etched around his eyes. "You always did have a way with words, schoolteacher." As they sat together in the gathering darkness, the lights of their home glowing behind them and the vast Montana landscape stretching before them, Zara knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just love, but something far rarer, a love that had only grown stronger with each passing year, each shared joy and sorrow, each new life they had welcomed together. In Silver Creek, they still told the story of the schoolteacher and the rancher who had fallen in love at first sight, how he had loved her so fiercely from the beginning that the whole town had known she would never be alone again. And while Zara smiled at the romanticized version that had become local legend, she knew the reality was even more precious. A love built day by day, choice by choice, through all the ordinary and extraordinary moments that made up a life shared. It was, she reflected as Jack drew her closer under the canopy of stars, the greatest adventure she could have ever imagined, and it had only just begun.